Hi, everyone. We have here with us today Ritu Kapur. She's co-founder and managing director of Quint Digital Media Limited. Ritu has spent over two decades in broadcast as a founder of Network 18, where she's won various awards. One of them being like a docudrama series, Power, and for the Citizen Journalist Show, among others. She's currently on the advisory board of Oxford University's Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism as well. One of her key tasks on a day-to-day basis is looking after the Quint, an independent news site in India. And as she does that, key aspect of that is basically looking at analytics and helping drive growth on the Quint. She's also involved with BQ Prime to some extent. So let's sort of start off with discussing on how analytics helps drive growth on digital media sites. I'm sure Ritu is going to have a ton of information that's going to be helpful for us for today. Welcome, Ritu.
Hi, thanks for having me here. I'm guessing everybody here already knows pretty much what I know, but happy to get into a conversation.
Great, yeah, let's get started. So let's just jump into this straight. So Ritu, my first question to you is, how are publishers like the Quint and let's say BQ Prime as well, using analytics today? And when I say that, I mean like if you could sort of segment that into the key metrics that you use versus, the peripheral metrics that you do track to sort of, maybe not as regularly as the vital metrics.
Okay, so I don't handle BQ Prime on an everyday basis. I just sort of get secondhand. I just bask in the reflected glory there. But largely the metrics that we're looking at, which I guess would be similar for most publishers today, is most immediately we look at real-time analytics, which is the basis for which we decide, since news is evolving through the day, it's prime time all the time on digital, what's working, what needs to be relooked at, what is the kind of story that is actually driving a lot of user interest right now, in what format, is it the text, is it the video, is it audio? So for that we use Chartbeat. Chartbeat is our real-time analysis platform, which also, Chartbeat has also evolved over time. So through Chartbeat, we're also looking at where is the traffic coming from real time? Is it coming from referral? Is it coming from social? Is it coming from search? Is it coming direct? We look a little more carefully at GA real time, but GA is, since we are not on Google 360, we're mindful of the fact that this is sample data. So, you allow it to inform editorial decisions. But I think in a lot of ways, editorial decisions also inform the analytics because you can't be blindly driven by that. Since we are an ad revenue driven website, BQ Prime is, of course, has a very strong and robust subscription model. But we at the Quint, we have a membership model, which is really more a participatory and contributory sort of relationship with our readers. We look at, so the other metrics that are important for us, therefore, is, now sales gets the two kinds of metrics that you're looking for sales. One is, of course, for all the display ad content that there is there, which is either programmatic or it's direct display sort of teams that our direct sales team has got, for which, of course, for us, for that, impressions is the ad revenue, the ad industry. We're hoping to evangelize other metrics with them, but largely it is impressions. The other aspect of sales metrics is we do a lot of branded content. And that's a little akin to looking at page views. Increasingly, we're seeing some shift from page views to uniques, unique visitors. And again, it's largely in the form of MAUs, monthly active users, that brands or clients or agencies look at. What we are hoping to push as a metric, which we think is important, is looking at various metrics of engagement.
Okay.
So those, we can talk a little more about what kind of engagement. So that's on the site. Then of course there is closely tracking on various social media platforms. YouTube, which is of course both a search and a social platform. So we look at those metrics carefully in terms of how many video views, but increasingly for us, the metric that is becoming important from a content and editorial point of view is watch time.
Okay.
At what percentage of the total minutes of a video was watched? Why did people fall off when they fell off? And of course, user behavior is completely different on a platform like YouTube versus a platform like Facebook. Facebook is obviously a much more snacky, much more entertainment-oriented, trending content, whereas YouTube is a far more deeper engaged. It's also an audience that's coming through search, so the intent is much more there. So therefore, watch time is becoming more important as a metric for us on YouTube versus, say, Facebook, where you know that it's discovery of what's popping up on your feed, and therefore the first 5 seconds of a video become far more important for us on Facebook. And increasingly now an interesting platform for us, of course, is Instagram.
Yeah.
Everyone's in Instagram.
Yes. Okay, that's really interesting. So you mentioned social media and you mentioned using Google Analytics as well as Chartbeat on your main site, right? How much of your traffic do you attribute to social media versus your main site?
It yo-yos month on month. So there'd be a month where almost 40% of our audience would have come to us through social media platforms. And there would be, the very next month where almost 60% of the traffic would come through search. I think that's sort of cyclical. It depends on what's happening in the news cycle.
Okay.
So for instance, clearly when the unfortunate episode of Aryan Khan's arrest happened, our search traffic, our organic traffic sort of skyrocketed. But if, it's not a big news month, then you might get a slightly more higher traffic from social. And again, it's important to see social because social is, of course, traffic that's coming to you from social, but we equally keep in mind and factor in natively consumed content on the platforms because that's equally, we respect that audience as much as we respect, we do respect the audience that takes the trouble to come to our site a little bit more, but we do respect the audience that's engaging with us. So there, what's important for us is degree of engagement.
Okay.
So if on social, if we're getting the traffic of content consumption on social natively itself, but the degree of engagement is very deep, then that's something that we look at carefully, and we also look at the nature of engagement, whether it's commenting, whether it's sharing, it's the amount of time that was spent on that piece of content.
Okay, interesting. So you're basically saying that pretty much 50% on importance paid to social media traffic and 50% to your site, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of analytics tools for social media, you have to leverage just their native analytics tools.
Yeah.
Okay.
As you're aware, they don't open up their APIs for, there are third-party tools which give you, similar web, will showcase what your traffic from social is, but that's always very approximate and not very accurate.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question. We talked about content being different on each of these social media sites as well as on your native site, right? So how much do these analytics data sort of feed into what you do on a day-to-day basis in terms of the content you write, create, the type of content you write, and how does it affect your editorial staff on a day-to-day basis?
We don't bring our morning edit meeting. There is no conversation or almost no conversation about traffic.
Okay.
Because that is really driven by, I don't think we let day-on-day analytics or week-on-week analytics influence our editorial decisions, because you can go very wrong with that. But month on month, we look at broad trends. For example, we've seen a clear trend. Let's go back to from when we were born to now on video. When we were born, it was almost a sin for a video to go beyond 45 seconds to 46 seconds. It was like somehow cut that 1 second down. You know, nobody's going to stay beyond 45 seconds. And if it's 30 seconds, that's fabulous. But we were the first, the Quint was the first news site which was creating videos for digital only consumption. So crafted for digital platforms, for mobile, at that time there was largely 16:9 aspect ratio. So it wasn't really sort of vertical videos wasn't the thing at that point. And we, decided to push the envelope a little bit, not just go by what the trend was. And we started discovering that people were engaging with deeper videos. We experimented with that further and we took it to documentaries. Initially, our documentaries would be about 10 minutes to 12 minutes. We stretched it to 20 minutes and we discovered that those videos were doing really, really well. So we took the lead there. So it was metrics following content as against, content following metrics. But what we have seen, it's sort of coming full circle. TikTok came and skewed the consumer behavior, especially in the US market. All platforms, therefore, then tweaked their algos to shorts on YouTube, reels on Facebook, and Instagram has its reels, of course. Facebook has its own short format. And now we are finding that consumer behavior itself has changed. So people are wanting content in a shorter format and move out of it. So we're now using shorter formats to lure, we're creating much more shorter format than we were, but we're using those to lure the audiences to give them a reason to come to the longer format.
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, so I think that's for a news site, I think that's important. I think if you can go, I think you can go very wrong if you just look at the on-day metrics. As in say, okay, yesterday a Kacha Badam video did really well, so let's make 4 more Kacha Badam videos. Will not happen.
Correct. And I believe that's a learning you had, right? Because I think as publishers moved to digital, there was this whole trend of following metrics and making sure you have more traffic. Was it anything that sort of helped you switch, or was it gradual? Was it something in the analytics data that you saw?
I think what was in the analytics data, I think we've had both successes and failures. I think what the analytics data showed us that some experiments get rewarded. That the audience is a invested audience. And it's also an audience that's getting bored with templated formats. I think that's definitely a learning for us at the Quint. If we keep making our videos in the exact same way that we made even 6 months ago, you start finding that there is a fatigue. For instance, a recent analysis that we did was we found that when we were putting out quick news videos or something which is sort of top news of the day, we would get huge audiences on the video, and then it would, that wave would recede very quickly within, less than 24 hours. So clearly, what is, you've got to constantly keep an eye on the landscape. So how has the landscape changed between what we did with videos 6 years ago and what we're doing with videos? What's happened is that large legacy organizations, largely broadcasters, with their OB bands and their, live views, etc., they're now being able to put out those news videos very, very quickly. And they're now all catering as much as us to digital audiences. And we no longer have the, free play that we had with our audiences. And now we're competing with them. So clearly that's cue to us. We obviously cannot put out a news video as fast as a broadcast channel can, which means we're putting in that much more mehnat to put that video out for getting much lesser time for the audience who's already, and now what the audience also is telling us, again, this is based on analysis, is that they're coming to us when we are value adding to a video. We're either bringing in an editorial perspective, or we've sent somebody on the ground and we've got a perspective which nobody else has, or, there has to be a value add. So it's also, in a sense, not the optimal use of our resources.
Yeah.
So now that gives you an example of how you slightly lead the audience with them. I mean, you lead the metrics and you also watch metrics, but don't get blindly led by that. You have to be able to analyze what that audience is telling you. It's not telling you don't do news videos. Telling you what's the Quint's USP. And Quint's USP is not just telling me that Musewala got shot. You're going to tell me something more.
Right.
So, yeah.
So what you're saying is basically watch the analytics data for the trend instead of just dive into it day-to-day and react to it, right? Yeah. And that seems to be working for the Quint in terms of creating deeper content and sort of waiting for the audience to react to it. For your video, you mentioned how users sort of consume certain duration of the video. Use specific tools for getting data on how your video content is consumed, or is it?
It's all available. I mean, the platforms provide it themselves. YouTube provides it, Facebook provides it, Instagram doesn't provide it yet, but it's beginning to get too deeper.
Great. Okay. And then switching gears a little bit. So in terms of insights into the content that you're writing, does the data, the analytics data feed into, like, let's say, the sentiment of the content you're writing at all? Does it sort of inform your editorial staff that, yes, this is the kind of content that, you know, the Quint readers sort of prefer to use? Is that at all being used?
Again, broad trends, yes. We see that opinion pieces get, and again, Chartbeat is an important tool for us there, because 95% of our audience is coming on mobile. Now that is an important metric that governs how we create the content. You know, we actually talk in terms of what's in the first scroll, what's in the second scroll, what's in the third scroll. We're also mindful that you mustn't clutter the first scroll with too many ads or too much other information, because, you know, the other very important metric that we look at is bounce rate. And that's an important metric for us. So we definitely look at what's there. You know, for instance, it's very clear to us that the first scroll on an article should give the reader a reason for why they must read this article, which they could have got similar content on other sites. What is the unique insight or fact that we have, for which you should stay on and read the rest of the article? And then we track Chartbeat quite closely to see what was the depth scroll, that scroll depth that the user showed when on that article. Again, you know, when we were born, the trend was that it's a 300-word or a 400-word article that, you know, look at, and then InShots came along and sort of proved the rule. But again, we chose not to be blindly led by that. I think what we said was, I think we have to make sure that a story is compelling enough for the user to stay. And that in some instances, we've seen younger audiences, you know, it's also believed that younger audiences don't read deep and they want quick and they're distracted, and attention economy and, you know, the buzzwords that we're familiar with. But we've seen that a well drafted, compelling, unique offering does get fairly deep engagement. And we've seen that engagement go, 4 years ago, I would find that halfway through the article, we would be down to about 20% of the audience left reading it. Now that metric has gone deeper. So yeah, so I think what you have to learn from analytics is what can you be doing better rather than what should you be doing more of. I don't think audiences anymore are looking for more. I think it is a mistake that a lot of us in our newsroom make a mistake of, which, you know, people are liking X, let's do more of X.
Yeah.
I think the important thing is to understand why are they liking X and what was what was there in that particular piece of content that compelled people, and what should you be therefore mindful of when you're picking up another story altogether.
That's interesting. So yeah, it's actually very heartening to see there's a move from quantity to quality as well in terms of content. Does that sort of lead you into sort of a paywall for content as well. I know the Quint doesn't have a paywall, but BQ Prime does. So just want to understand how analytics drives paywall content, subscription content.
So, I mean, at the Quint, we don't have a paywall, but we do have a membership relationship with our audience. And I think the similarity between what BQ does and what we do is we use metrics and, various data layering, or, Google has these goals and events kind of mapping that you can do to really study user journey and to be very, very careful of from what content did the conversion happen. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there are real surprises over there. Now, sometimes it's predictable. For instance, in BQ's case, they discovered that their very in-depth research reports were leading to conversions. So what they did as a strategy was that they opened up for a certain period of time, they opened up their research reports as free, and then they strategized to get people to sample those free reports, understand the value of that, and then get them to convert to a 1-year, 2-year plan. So it's also the whole debate that they had over years on how many pieces does an audience get free before they encounter the paywall, and what kind of content do they get free before they encounter the paywall. And that's they also experimented with the micro payments, and they discovered that that was a bad strategy because people would come and just consume that one story, but not necessarily feel compelled to have a deeper engagement thereafter. But if I've paid up for a year, then I want my money is worth out of it. So that leads to just deeper engagement on the side.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, that bit about the micropayments, because we've heard various publishers wanting to experiment with micropayments as well. So interestingly, what you're sort of driving to is that content has sort of the analytics into the type of content that the audience is consuming is helping you drive your engagement much more, right? So speaking of which, does the Quint sort of use, AI, ML is sort of the other buzzwords out there. Certain aspects of, like recommendations to the audience in order to increase engagement or user session time, etc. Sort of more adopted probably, let's say in the US and such. Are we also looking at that kind of an adoption at our end? Do you guys have any sort of integrations that help you drive user engagement through recommendations or personalization?
We use AI for to increase internal circulation. We have a recommendation engine which studies user behavior on the side, and therefore, either within the article, you'll see these also reads, and at the bottom of the articles, there will be something called more reads or more news. So also reads are put in by reporters and editors, by the editorial team, what we think anybody consuming that piece of content would do. So that basically there's a mix of serendipity and machine learning, whereas the more news is recommendations by a machine that has studied your behavior and is therefore recommending more content basis your behavior. Now that's a logic that we have experimented with. If I come in for a sports story, do I only want to consume more sports stories, or should the recommendation engine recommend just more sports stories? We feel perhaps not. We feel we should be able to look, the better learning will be if initially the machine offers slight diverse but like-minded content, maybe from the entertainment section or from our citizen journalist section, and then see how, and then let the machine learn from that, rather than pre-program the learning too much.
Right. Okay, interesting. And what kind of analytics? So this engine you integrate, does that offer you data on how well the recommendations are doing? And are you looking for specific metrics there?
Yeah, we're looking for, we're hoping to increase pages per session with that.
Okay.
So we track 2 metrics. We track, which we get from the tool itself, on how many page views were there on the recommendations. But what we look at for the broader trends is pages per session from Quintype. And on Chartbeat, you get to see immediately where the internal circulation was. So Chartbeat on every article tells you where they went from where. You can go in and check. But that gives it to you real time. Whereas GA gives it to you sort of for the day and gives you the sort of broader numbers. So yeah, so we do a mix of the metrics that the tool itself is offering and the other metrics that we have, like Chartbeat and Google.
And are you seeing any trends of increased page views having used the recommendations tools through these analytics tools?
Yes, we have.
Great. Awesome. So sort of moving on to my next question here. You mentioned like you use all of these various tools, right? Chartbeat for sort of a deeper learning of how your audience is consuming content, GA more superficial, etc. What would your ideal analytics toolkit look like?
Well, my ideal would be one that gives me one dashboard. It gives me one dashboard, which gives me, you see, because there's a lot of learning between metrics which are catering to ad revenue versus metrics that are catering to editorial content versus metrics that are looking at conversion to payments on the site. Now, they are all reflective of user behavior. So, you know, it would be really helpful if one could look at user behavior across rather than look at user behavior in silos. So, you know, one dashboard which gives me, you know, what Google Ad Management gives me through, you know, through the impressions. It gives me, of course, everything that GA gives me in terms of watch, you know, time per session, pages per session, you know, all the metrics that they give me. But one that can also get me my social media metrics, which is how was the behavior of the traffic that came from social media to the site versus the behavior of the traffic that came directly to the site. And therefore, what are the learnings for me? Are the same things being consumed? And and the same thing, if it could give me the user journey, because I think we don't give enough importance to the user journey, because, you know, that should then feed your UI UX as well. Okay. You know, sometimes people are bouncing off, not because they were not interested in your content. They might be bouncing off because of a tech glitch. They might be bouncing off because there is maybe you placed your pop-up for, you know, driving subscriptions to your newsletter at the wrong place. You're actually pissing people off where you think you're actually trying to ensnare people into, you know, subscribing to your newsletter. So the user journey is a metric that I really, really think. So, I mean, in an ideal world, I want my social, my user journey, my, you know, ad management, time spent on ads, etc. And, you know, for instance, it's interesting for us to learn that some of our membership conversions, I mean, you would imagine that we use our documentaries and our deep dive investigations to drive our membership, saying this is what the kind of journalism we believe in, this is what you should pay for and support, etc. But it's interesting for us to see that a lot of the conversions that are coming to us through entertainment content. Or even more interestingly, some of the content is coming to us through some of our branded content, which is overtly, transparently labeled as, you know, this is sponsored content. But people came there for whatever reason they found value in that content, and then they actually converted to support us. Now, you want to be able to understand that behavior.
Okay. And which part of the funnel is most important here for you? The part where it converts, let's say, from a social media channel to coming in versus sort of retaining those customers once they're in on your website?
I mean, ideal is somebody who came to us through either referral or social. And then if that same person's behavior changed to coming directly to site. Because that is ultimately your goal, right? To be able to get as many people to convert on the home page. Also, it's interesting for us to see, you know, get much higher traffic on story pages than on the home page. And we have now used some analysis of our metrics to actually increase footfall on the homepage by just studying metrics. And strangely, we were tracking user behavior to look at conversions for our membership model. And that actually gave us insights on what will drive more traffic on the homepage. And then we were able to see that the significant number of conversions to membership come from a widget on the homepage itself.
Okay. Interesting.
So it's
very interesting. Okay.
I mean, some of it, to be honest, is tukabazi, guesswork, and some of it is
makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So it's more like reading the data with intuition.
Yeah, I mean, the gut has to play a significant role there. And you know, it has to be a marriage of listening, not just to metrics, but listening to social media conversations, to comments. But we have very engaged audiences who write to us directly on our email ID. We get tons of emails every day. So there's a lot of insight for us there itself. Okay. So it's a mix.
Do you run any form of newsletters as well?
Yeah, we have a daily newsletter, and we have a separate membership newsletter, and we have a fairly deep engagement with our members. We do regular what we call Q brainstorms, where we invite all our members to come and tell us what we're doing that they don't agree with, what is it that we're missing that we should be doing more of, or a particular story. As also, before any of our documentaries or our special projects is made, we actually do something called a Q screening. We invite all our members to come and watch the editor's cut of the documentary or the special project. And very often we get some insights from our members, and so we then use that. So your feedback is coming in various, yeah.
And any specific tools you use to analyze data on how your newsletters are consumed?
Yeah, we have, we run our newsletters on MailChimp. Okay. And we get fairly effective data from MailChimp itself. Now for us, what's important is, open rate is important, but for us, the click-through rate is far more important. So the critical metric for us is, we have reformatted our newsletter several times over to see what works to drive better click-through rates, because the purpose of our newsletter as it is right now is still to drive traffic to the site rather than the newsletter itself.
All right, so that brings me sort of towards my last question. You use Quintype as your CMS today. Do you have any specific asks that the CMS that, would sort of help fulfill your analytics needs?
Ideally, if we could get complete analytics from the CMS, because like I said, we are depending on sample data on Google Analytics, which is just a percentage, which is an average data based on a portion of the content. Whereas analytics on the site, which we had right in the beginning when Quintype was born, it would give us fairly deep insight into everything on our site. From which author was being read more, to what percentage of traffic went to a particular format. Were there video views coming on the site, or were they coming largely, people were just consuming the written piece and they were not in videos being watched elsewhere, etc. So that, the big difference for us is that, and as all of us are now moving towards building first-party data in some way or the other. And I think CMS analytics on your CMS would be so instrumental towards making sense of that first-party data.
And as you write content, is there anything that the whole CMS can do while your staff creates content, writes content, in terms of providing you more data, anything contextual?
I don't know so much about writing content, but I think definitely in terms of ranking, for instance, once I have my stories and they're all on the sorter, if what story should be ranked where if on the sorter itself, I could see what kind of traffic each story is driving.
Right.
So I might actually want to push up a story that's not driving enough traffic because it's maybe doesn't have the discoverability that the other stories have. On the other hand, on another day, I might want to push more of the kind of content that a certain story is getting. So immediately I'm getting to see which currently we go to Chartbeat for.
Right.
So you have multiple windows open. But if it's there on your sorter, it's even a new story that has just come in.
And how well that is doing on your sorter.
Yeah, and also on the left side, you might have a story that is 2 or 3 days old, but there might be a renewed interest in that story. So there might be a reason for you to go in and update that story and repost it because, the sorter is giving you the analytics to tell you that.
All right. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Feedback taken. Anything else you want to sort of talk to our audience about in terms of advice in how you should follow analytics, not follow analytics, etc.?
I just feel as an industry, all of us should come together and really, really push for retention and engagement data as more critical metrics and the breadth of, go for depth of analytics rather than breadth of analytics, and rather than only look at page views and video views, because I fear that is maybe coming in the way of innovation, because sometimes, we at the Quint do a lot of experimenting with formats, interactives, immersives, etc. And if you were to just let metrics decide that, so maybe I don't get 1,000 people on that, for instance, we did a very deep immersive using graphic novel on the farmers' protest. So I may not get millions of people coming there, but what was meaningful for me was those who came, how deep did they go? And that becomes the cue for me to do more or less of such content. But as an industry, if you're able to go to market with the metrics of depth of consumption and engagement and retention, because I think everything being page views is just too shallow. It's just too shallow a metric.
Yeah, and it's good to see, the switch, the gradual switch to richer content is to happen. And it's good to see that it is happening and people are more interested based on what data is showing you. All right, thank you, Ritu. So let's sort of open up to Q&A here. I can see a few questions here. So we have somebody asking on Chartbeat, you can see how far a person read the story. Can you tell on Chartbeat how much of the story has been consumed?
Yes, you can. Yes, Chartbeat has a feature called heads up display, which you you get that going and then you open your site, and it on each story, it tells you, it sort of color codes, white or green or red, and each color has a certain meaning. That's this. You're being read. White is, I think, you're being read as much as anybody else, any other site on that. Red is you're being read, but somebody else is being read much more than you on the same story. And green is when you're doing better than your competitors. And then on each, it sort of gives you a heat map of where are people. Even if on a nav bar, it tells you how many people are consuming what on your nav bar. And then when you click on a story, you can actually see. On the left-hand side, you'll see this blue line, and you go further down, so you keep scrolling up, it'll tell you what percentage of audience has stayed with what part of the story.
Great, thanks. I think the second question is similar. We're trying to see how far people read our investigative pieces. What would you recommend we use to be able to?
Yeah, I would recommend the heads-up display feature of Chartbeat.
How does social media impact on your day-to-day basis traffic? So day-to-day traffic, what strategy do you suggest to follow to get the traffic to increase on Facebook and YouTube?
Well, the strategies for Facebook and YouTube would be very different, because the audience on Facebook is younger. Now it's much more the tier 2, tier 3 audience. And again, like I said, that's more an audience that sort of comes there for friends and family content, and the algo just throws up, studying their behavior, it throws up content on their news feeds. So, so necessarily what does better on Facebook is content that's already pre-viral or trending. Having said that, I think that audience also has an appetite for unusual content. You know, for instance, we have a series we call Hope, which is about people who dealt with adversity and, you know, sort of human stories. That does really well. Whereas on YouTube, it's an audience that's coming with intention to consume content. So it's a search audience. I mean, search is one of the highest consumption driving elements on YouTube. So you're a little more SEO driven there, but I find that YouTube audiences prefers a slightly longer video for them to engage with you. They are not, and you see, there's a risk on YouTube where you can be completely blinded by search. That, you know, these are the 10 trending keywords today, and we must do, and you will find that that doesn't necessarily drive that audience. I think it's a crowded space. There, you know, we all know how many people were there. We also know that 85% of all consumption on the internet is videos on YouTube. So it's massive, it's huge. Don't try and cater something for everybody. I think it's very, very important on YouTube to have your unique identity, your unique offering, your distinct offering, which nobody else has, which isn't necessarily true for Facebook. So for Facebook, if the algo is pushing food videos and you do food videos, you'll find food videos that are pretty good. Not the same for YouTube, because I think it's a slightly more discerning audience.
I think the same audience, the same listener is sort of asking, do you suggest every news should go on Facebook?
Sorry, what's the question?
Do you suggest every news should go on Facebook?
Every news? No, I actually don't think that people are hugely consuming. For instance, political news or current affairs are not that hugely consumed.
Mm-hmm.
There was a study that was done by somebody for YouTube, and what it showed was that people who come on YouTube take journalistic work and that of influencers with equal importance. Those on Facebook do not take content by journalists. They do not rank it higher or see it as more credible or whatever than anything that anybody is sending. So anybody who I like and who's my friend on Facebook, I'm likely to go for that over, you know, has this come from the BBC or has this come from the Washington Post or has it come from, you know, the Wire or the Quint or, you know, Times of India. So we find that it's sports and entertainment and, you know, lifestyle content that does a little better. And the really big news, you know, again, like if I give you the Aryan Khan example, it'll be the really big news, but our top videos will not necessarily be news of the day.
This is to me. So how about Twitter? How much focus do you guys pay to Twitter in terms of news, publishing news?
I think Twitter, we of course post almost all our content on Twitter, but Twitter is not a large audience for us. It's an important and significant audience. It's an audience that matters to us, but it's not, I mean, nowhere as large as Instagram and Facebook and YouTube for us. YouTube is of course our largest footfall is on YouTube.
Okay, somebody sort of comment, social sites behavior is somewhat unimaginable. If one video gets more views in other small channels, it won't get the same impression in some verified channels. It's just a comment. Do you have anything to say to this, Ritu?
I call it the hormonal algorithm. It just sort of swings. So yeah, you've got to, I mean, my larger mantra would be, this is what I stand for. This is the quality of journalism we do. This is what we believe in. This is what we think we must counter in terms of a predominant narratives that may exist, and this is what we believe in. And I think your brand proposition, your identity in terms of your content, I think you need to be able to build that, because it shouldn't be that somebody comes and watches your video and says, I saw this video, maybe it was Times of India, maybe it was Indian Express, maybe it was, you have to build a style book and a content philosophy, which is distinct. Because if you try and swing with the algos, you'll be, or with SEO, you swing with SEO and you swing with the keywords and trends, and then we'll all be the same, right? We'll all be publishing the exact same thing. We all have the exact same keywords are popping into our SEO, and So, obviously, I'm not saying you can completely turn a blind eye to SEO, and there's a reason why we have very significant SEO teams in all our newsrooms. But largely, what's your voice?
Got it. Any more questions? I don't see other questions. If anybody has any more questions, we can give it a minute.
Rashmi, there is one on the chat.
Oh, there is. The one, okay, hold on. Yeah, what's your advice to publishers who are still struggling to establish paywalls? In Botswana, the reading population is reluctant to pay for news, and publishers can't quite figure out how to charge for content without risking losing out on the web traffic and consequently the advertising that comes with it.
Yeah, I must confess, I don't have any quick and easy answers here, because the success that Bloomberg Quint, now BQ Prime, has with a subscription paywall is because it is a business and corporate news site. There is a clear utility offering, which is not the same as a general news site as the Quint. There's we haven't considered a paywall right now, which is why we only have a membership. But I think in the long term, the question that all of us have to answer is, why would someone pay for my content? And who is that person? And for that, you of course turn to your analytics and cohorts and gender and age and geography of your audience. And of course, whether they're returning or they are just snacking audience, is why would eventually, and in my head, there are two things. One is credibility, because in an environment of complete, there's such a trust deficit with news in audiences globally. And the second is unique, distinct content, which they will get nowhere else. But I don't have quick and easy answers on a paywall for a general news site, because I think Hindu is one of the success stories there. And I think credibility is one of the things that's driving that.
Interesting. Yeah. Right. I think with this, we can sort of end the session here. I don't see any more questions. Thank you, Ritu. So I think our key learnings here have been sort of pay attention to your content. Don't let metrics drive your content. Let your content drive your metrics, right? And pay attention to the quality of the content. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ritu. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you also to everyone who took their time out for today. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.